I advise you listen to this whole podcast. I know that I have suggested this before, and I often recommend listening to podcasts as a way of improving your English. Well, today, I would like to propose you grab a pen and a notebook and listen up.
Welcome to another Happy English podcast coming to you from New York City. And here's your English teacher, Michael.
All right. Thank you, John, and thanks, everyone. It's Michael here from Happy English, and I help people speak English better. This is Happy English Podcast, episode 720. Advise, propose, recommend, and suggest. When you have advice that you want another person to consider, there are 4 verbs that you can use. These are advise, propose, recommend, and suggest. Interestingly, these verbs can be used with 3 different grammar patterns, which is what we're going to look at today. By the end of this podcast English lesson, you'll be able to use all 4 verbs in all 3 grammar patterns with ease. Let's dive in. The first thing I want to talk about is the difference between these 4 words. Advise is the most formal. Usually people with some authority use the word advise, like doctors and bosses, as well as people doing official business, like the police and government officials. You've probably heard TV commercials that say things like,
4 out of 5 doctors advise a low-fat diet.
Sounds official, right? Propose is also official sounding, and for me, propose is a word often used by people in charge. In the Star Trek TV series, Captain Kirk would turn to Spock and ask,
Mr. Spock, what do you propose?
In everyday English conversation, you can use suggest and recommend. When you suggest something, you think it's a good idea. When you recommend something, it's probably because you think it's a good idea based on your experience. And now, let's look at the 3 grammar patterns that we use with advise, propose, recommend, and suggest. First of all, you can use these words followed by a noun. Here are some examples of that. The teacher suggests a podcast to learn English. Naoko recommended a book about dogs. I think most doctors advise a fat-free diet for your health. At the meeting, the HR manager proposed a change in the policy. The next grammar pattern is these 4 words followed by a gerund. That's the ing verb. For example, the teacher suggests listening to a podcast to learn English. Naoko recommended reading a book about dogs. I think most doctors advise staying on a fat-free diet for your health. At the meeting, the HR manager proposed changing the policy. And finally, you can use these 4 words followed by that, and then a subject and a base verb. Here are some examples of this pattern. The teacher suggested that she listen to a podcast to learn English. Notice I said she listened and not she listens. With these 4 verbs in this grammar pattern, it's always a subject followed by a base verb. The teacher suggested that she listened to a podcast to learn English. Here are some other examples. Naoko recommended that he read a book about dogs. I think most doctors advise that you stay on a fat-free diet for your health. At the meeting, the HR manager proposed that they change the policy. By the way, in conversational English, that is often omitted from sentences like these. For example, the teacher suggested she listen to a podcast to learn English. Naoko recommended he read a book about dogs. The doctor advised I stay on a fat-free diet. Keep in mind, the best way to remember this and any other word or phrase in English is to take that word or phrase, write it in a sentence that's true for you or true in your world, and then memorize your sentences. By the way, can you imagine getting the chance to practice this kind of English with me directly? You can get more practice using your English when you join my Podcast Learners Study Group. There, you can make new friends, join us for live group coaching every week where we practice these podcast lessons together. Plus, you get access to the PDF transcript and audio download for every Happy English podcast in the past and in the future. And, on top of that, each episode has exercises where you can practice this English point with speaking and writing checked by me. To learn more, or to see some of the example sentences from this lesson, just visit myhappyenglish.com and choose Podcast Lesson 720. Remember, learning another language is not easy, but it's not impossible, and I'm here to help you on your journey.
This podcast is brought to you by Happy English. Please visit myhappyenglish.com. Show your support for Happy English by leaving us a review. Get English, get happy, Happy English.